This, of course, is the flag of sackcloth, which I'm just going to continue waving. For today's edition of the Sophie Scholl Monologue, I'm going to talk about Mamdani, MLK, and the Nazarene Church. Yeah, they all fit together. Well, sort of. But isn't it interesting that as you just observe what's happening here recently, anytime there's a rumor of the price of oil going up, what do you see at the gas station? Continued increase in the price. That's aggravating. And then when it went down like $11 a couple days ago, did the price of gas go down? No, it stayed the same. That's just frustrating. Or, man, I think about this. I know there's issues in Iran, of course, with all the bombing and what we've been doing as a nation, but do you know that less American soldiers have been killed than those who were killed in Chicago over Easter weekend? Doesn't that say something? But I'm not talking about that today. I'm talking about Mamdani, MLK, and a Nazarene church. See, Mamdani showed up in a church on Easter Sunday morning. He showed up at the Bethany, Bronx Church of the Nazarene. I thought, what is he doing at a church? Oh, he had something to say. He said good morning to everybody and talked about Easter being a time where they're singing, sky-high bonnets, strolls through the park, egg hunts, and potato salad. Is that what you think of when you think of Easter? Now, he did bring in the cross, the burial, and the resurrection of Jesus, which made me think, what is a Shiite Muslim in a Nazarene church doing talking about Christ dying? Because Muslims don't believe that Christ died. And his resurrection, how could he resurrect if he didn't die? Was he just being politically correct, given the situation he was in at a church? Now, did he talk about the significance of the resurrection? Did he talk about the meaning of the gospel? Of course not. You're not going to do that if you're a Muslim. But he did talk about Martin Luther King and brought up a sermon he gave way back when, a walk through the Holy Land, an Easter sermon delivered in Montgomery, Alabama. But that walk in that sermon included him telling the congregants, we've been buried in numerous graves, the grave of economic insecurity, the grave of exploitation, and the grave of oppression. You're hearing about the social gospel, not the gospel. But MLK really wasn't about the gospel. I know that's controversial to say. He more resembled a liberation theologian than he did an evangelical gospel preacher. It just needs to be said. He even denied the bodily resurrection of Jesus. Don't have Martin Luther King be your theologian. If you want to talk about civil rights and Martin Luther King, okay, but I wouldn't talk about him at all when it comes to sound, good theology from Scripture, squaring it with the gospel of Jesus Christ, dying on the cross, buried in the grave, and resurrecting in the body on that day in Easter. Well, what did Mamdani talk about at this Nazarene church as he brought out Martin Luther King? Well, he talked about all the policies he's delivering as a mayor of New York City. That's basically the content of his message. Talking about how 200,000 black New Yorkers have been forced to leave New York City because they cannot afford a dignified life there. Do you ever think about the taxation and regulation that's there in New York City? And as mayor, he said in less than 100 days, His administration has secured a $1 billion agreement with the governor of our state to deliver universal child care in this city. Where does the money come from to do all that? It comes from us taxpayers. So here you see an Easter address given by Mamdani at a Nazarene church, talking about MLK. Does something not look right there? It should, because if you talk about Easter, you're going to talk about the significance of the resurrection. How that proved what Jesus did on the cross for our sin constitutes the message of the gospel. God's only power to save souls who are lost in sin. We're all lost in sin. We need a soul saver. We need somebody who's going to redeem the body, because these bodies too are going to end up in the grave. And the only power that can do that is the gospel. What Jesus did on the cross, in his burial in the grave, and in his resurrection from the tomb in literal bodily form. That's the message. That's the message that Mamdani didn't bring to the church in South Bronx, or the church in the Bronx Bethany Church of the Nazarene. That's supposedly a holiness church. What are you doing having a Shiite Muslim speak with a litany of political things that he wants to accomplish on a Sunday morning of Easter, when it should be about Jesus, the gospel, and his power to save? Well, unlike Tony Kornheiser of Pardon the Interruption, I cannot promise you that I'll do better the next time. And unlike Tony, I'm going to wave the flag of sackcloth. As a follower of Jesus, I need Jesus.